I find that being uncomfortable is one of the things that stop us leaders and, quite frankly, everybody from going after what we want. But today, my special guest and I are going to debunk the myth that being uncomfortable is a bad thing. In fact, when you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, amazing things can happen for you. Don't go anywhere. So excited because I have a powerhouse. You're gonna love this woman. Her name is Katie Beach, and she's a dynamic speaker and leadership development expert with over 20 years of experience inspiring leaders and teams to reach their full potential. Drawing from a diverse background in Division One athletics, healthcare, career services, and economic development, Katie brings a unique perspective to her work, engaging audiences with high energy and actionable insights. I'm going to put her entire bio in the description of the podcast so you can enlighten yourself with all the things she has to offer. But I really want to get into talking about this that's so important, which is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But before we do that, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself because the audience know everything about me, but I want them to get to know you a little bit. So, Katie, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm doing so great today. I am located here in Southwest Virginia, in Salem, Virginia, right around Virginia Tech and Blacksburg and Roanoke. And we are enjoying some sunshine today. And so I'm excited to have this great day to jump on and talk about this important topic of kind of stepping through our discomfort and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I always think it's very important to kind of connect the dots on why is this topic so important to you? Like what makes you realize that this was it? This is what people need to hear.
Yes. So I think there's so many things. As you kind of stated, a lot of my background was in Division One athletics. So I started my career actually as an athletic trainer. So a lot of my time was spent sitting on the sidelines of games and sports, particularly women's sports. A lot of my time spent in women's athletics. And as I left that and entered the career world and the business world and kind of started working with industry, I was just kind of so shocked at how many inherently natural things that sport give us that we maybe don't carry into the business world. And so I really started doing some research, and there's some shocking statistics specifically as it relates to women that like 96% of women leaders in the C-suite had a background in sports, with like over half of those playing in Division One. And I was like, man, what is it about that? Like, what is it about these women? Like, it's not about how they could kick a ball, right, or run fast, or anything like that. And so I started reflecting on my time and really digging into some data and, courage, resiliency, a competitive mindset, the permission to fail, right? All those things were really traits that female leaders that were successful and
Mhm.
former student athletes rated higher in. And I started reflecting. I was like, you know what? They're comfortable with pushing their limits. They're comfortable with showing up to practice every day. They're comfortable with having those really hard, uncomfortable conversations, right? Like watching themselves on video, right? Like on how bad their swing might have
Terrifying,
been.
right?
Yeah, I mean, that instant feedback of failure, standing in front of thousands of people needing to kick a ball into a goal to go on to the next level of your championship. I mean, all
Mhm.
of these things aren't things we can replicate in the workplace, but they're all moments where we have to push ourselves a little bit, get a little bit uncomfortable, and man, the confidence and courage that it creates. And so while we might not ever line up for a PK or, cross the finish line of a marathon necessarily in our professional life, we can certainly push ourselves to get a little uncomfortable at a time.
A couple of things that come to me. It's like, so you're talking, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't never make it to a Division One or like a professional
Yeah,
sport. But then I'm like, oh wait a second, I'm a black belt in karate. So
absolutely.
yeah, talking about getting beat up, like literally getting beat up
Yes.
to be able to promote. But I don't want anyone to feel like I was thinking, right? Like I never made it
Yes.
to a Division One, so I'm done. Like I have no hope because this is exactly what we're gonna talk about. Like how can you get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I will tell you, Carmen, I probably couldn't even do karate. Like I was the one that taped ankles and gave them Gatorade and cheered them on. I can't throw a ball or catch a ball. I haven't done anything probably that would be considered remotely athletic since I was probably 6 or 8. But you know what? I was able to still learn those lessons. And I think that's what's so special is that once you notice the shift in mindset that makes so much sense in sports and you bring that into your industry and your work, it makes total sense.
Hmm.
And so I think it's a mindset shift, more than any action we can take.
And again, going back to my personal experience,
Yes.
it's why was important for me to go through the discomfort of becoming a black belt. And we're not going to go through the
Hmm.
story here, but I think that is the translatable question here of you want to get to the C level suite or whatever level of leadership you aspire to get to.
Hmm.
Why is so important to you? And then that fuel, that fire is what's going to help you say, okay, yes, I have to stop standing in front of people, address them, have the difficult conversations, show up every day like, is the best version of me, even if the world is crumbling at home or in my personal life or whatever it is, right? And so is that one of the things? I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder, but you're
Yeah.
speaking a lot here.
No, absolutely. I mean, that is absolutely it, is that we're never going to grow in leadership if we don't pursue what is an uncomfortable and a new thing, right? And those are not comfortable. In order to lead, we have to have really hard conversations. We have to step outside of our comfort zone if we may not be even super confident to do it. And I think what we tend to do as leaders, right, is that we try to go from I've never done this to I need to be perfect. And
Mhm.
then the minute we challenge ourselves and something goes wrong, we're like, okay, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Right. And instead, what I would say is that back to my athletics, because I relate it, it would make no sense for me to step into a weight room after lifting 5 pounds and say, you know what, I'm going to max out at 500 today. Everybody would be like, no, 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 Katie, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Yet we do that with leadership all the time, right? Like we say, okay, you've never led a team, you've never led a human. We've just promoted you for manager with no tools, no training. Now go have one-on-ones, go have performance evaluations, go lead your team and inspire them and create vision and do all those things. And we try to just put too much on, and try to get too uncomfortable. And we really need to figure out what that small zone of uncomfortable steps that we can have so that we don't overwhelm ourselves with all of them at the same time.
And I mean, I love that you brought that point, and I'm gonna attempt to go to the sports. I'm not a sporty person, but it's like, okay, so you probably got promoted to be a leader because you were the best individual contributor. You were
Right.
a master at your craft. You killed it. You deliver over and over again, and eventually someone said, "Oh my God, she's ready for the next step."
Hmm.
Such a disservice we do to people, right? Because we don't train them along the way to when they get to that point. But then that's the thing, is like, okay, I'm used to being the best at what I
Yes.
do, and now I get to this point, like, I can press, legs, whatever you say that. Let's say like, 300, 400, whatever it is, and now I'm just gonna do like bench presses, and I have no workout my biceps or my chest ever, right? Like,
Right.
probably sounds so silly right now. Speaking of hacking
No,
myself, probably
I love
will
it.
laugh
I
at
love
me.
it.
Uh, but that's the thing. It's like you might be very good at something, but now you're growing to a whole different skill set that is not natural. Some people are natural leaders, but most people are not.
Right.
However, it's totally a skill that you can learn with the right tools and the right mentors, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's where I think this sports like helps me so much to realize it is that there's a lot of really good soccer players, but
Mhm.
what separates those really good ones, right, from the ones that were playing Division 1, from the ones that were giving scholarship. There's some really really naturally talented people that never really like leaned into a sport, right? Or if you took that same All-American from a softball, I worked with a wonderful All-American pitcher, Angela Tincher, during my time at Virginia Tech, and she worked every single day. But let me tell you, if we put her in any other sport, it was hilarious, right? So she was an all-American pitcher and the one of the best at her crafts, but I would not put her onto the soccer field and expect her to be the best soccer player. And so just because you're such, to your point, we typically are judged on what we're doing and then promoted to the next level, particularly when it becomes from doing tasks to leading people to do the tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And as leaders, it's so much easier to jump in and do it ourselves. And what we have to do is shift that mindset into how do we train others to do it? How do we let them fail, right? Which is again very uncomfortable. Or how do we pull them, especially, a lot of what we see is leaders that get promoted within organizations. So not only are you leading individual contributors, you're most likely leading someone that is doing now your old job,
Yes.
right? And they might not be doing it the same way
They
you
might not
did.
be picking the same font or colors for the PowerPoint
No,
presentation, and you're freaked
exactly.
out because it's supposed to be blue, but now it's pink.
Yeah, and you know what? I would have done it this way, wouldn't it? But and it becomes very, very hard, and that is uncomfortable, right? We have to be comfortable with both the uncomfortable thing of watching someone do it their way, and sometimes the uncomfortableness of like, dang, that was actually a little bit better than I did it, and that's kind of hard to admit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or now I have to have a feedback conversation. And the only way I've ever learned how to do it is, the sandwich method of compliment, correction, compliment. And that's not always the most impactful, right? So what do I do? How do I have this? How do I, lead versus manage, which is, a big thing we don't talk about, in my opinion, as much as we should, right? Like that in order to be a good leader, you have to kind of do some of these day-to-day management aspects as well. And all of those things, right, are very intentional and most of the time involve doing something we haven't done and getting a little uncomfortable.
Can you share with us a little bit, like how do you teach people to get uncomfortable?
Yeah. It's starting by just doing one little thing, right? Like if you're uncomfortable speaking in front of people, don't sign up for a TED talk or, apply to a conference that has 500 people. That's great. Maybe you just stand up at your child's PTA meeting, right? And you volunteer to stand up at you ask a question at a conference in front of people instead of being the one that needs to deliver the content. If you're uncomfortable having a feedback conversation, have a positive feedback conversation first, right? Have something that feels a little bit more natural to you, in your pocket, and then build that confidence, right? And being okay that it's not going to necessarily be perfect. And
Yes.
instead of realizing that you need to be perfect, you just need to be a little bit better than yesterday, right?
Yeah.
We're never going to be perfect. We can only be the best version of who we can be.
So it's repetition, 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 like in a sport.
Repetition and a little bit more. Yes, it's practice, right? It is the commitment to training, right? So I talk about the three areas that I believe elite performers stand out in that we can translate into business, right? It's the competitive mindset, right? It's having that mindset that is completely different, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, knowing that hard things are going to be hard when they're new. Their commitment to training, right? So knowing, hey, I might need to take a course, I might need to practice how to give feedback, how to give a
Mhm.
performance evaluation, right? And then also the strategic preparation, right? So maybe I sit down with a coach or I sit down with a colleague or a mentor and I practice the feedback conversation, right? Or I even just write it out before I have it. I mean, so many leaders just walk into to this very uncomfortable moment and just like, okay, I'll just wing it, I'll figure it out. No
Yeah.
wonder you're even extra uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that intentionality of training and repetition and preparation, and just knowing like I am doing this to make this other person better, and that's my role as a leader.
The why, absolutely. I can think of training for tournament karate,
Yeah,
and sensei will make us do the katas like so slow that it will kill me. Like I was like, oh my god! Like at the first time, right? Like
yeah,
then I
yeah,
knew what I was doing. But like I was probably like a blue belt or a green belt, something, uh, and and it was like for weeks, like training at like a tortoise speed,
yeah.
like so slow, and I couldn't understand like why I was doing this. Like this is not what is going to be. And then before we know it, I think it was like maybe a week or two before the tournament is like super speed. But it's like
Mhm.
it has ingrained in your body in a way that now you can speed it up, right? And so it's
Right.
like this is the practice. This is the repetition, repetition, repetition. It's like, yes, when you think that you know it all,
Mhm.
that's when you have a problem because we
Mhm.
never stop growing. And I, with my career in corporate America, I've seen so many brilliant people, like brilliant human beings that are horrible leaders. Like
Mhm.
they never should have given people underneath them, and then they are not self-aware. And so this is one of the things I teach is like, are you self-aware of why you're showing up this way? Because a lot of
Mhm.
the times it's not that you want to be a bad leader, you just don't have the tools and you don't know why you're reacting the way you are, right? And so you're bringing all these things that you have been carrying your entire life into the forefront of your leadership every day. And until you decide, like, oh, let me look at, why I'm such a big
Mhm.
a hole, then you're never going to be able to change it. And so that's uncomfortable. It's very
Right.
uncomfortable to look at the mirror and said, oh, this is how I show up.
It is so uncomfortable. I mean, and to not be defensive about how you show up and feel like you have to necessarily correct it, right? It's that you have to almost just like plan for it, right? Like I'm a pretty direct person. I teach disc a lot as part of how we teach self-awareness, and it's amazing how many they get defensive. Oh, well, I just need to go be the other way. I'm like, you can't really be the other way. Like what you have to know is what I talk a lot about in leadership is you have to know what separate your intention from your impact, right?
Mhm.
So your intention may be to show up and get something done and get a result, but the impact on the person you're leading might be that you're too pushy, right? You're too direct and you're rude. And so your how you intend to show up and the impact of how you show up can be so different. And the more aware we are of how we can do, to your point, the self-awareness and digging into what our impact is on others, that's super uncomfortable. And then, like I say, sometimes you have to stretch to show up the way the other person is.
Most of
And
the
that
time.
is uncomfortable,
Most of the
right?
time. And it's like perception is reality. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
I have teenagers, right? And so it's like they are all different. And
Yes.
if I show up like I want to show up, I'll have a battlefield with every
Yeah.
single one of them all day long. So it's like, I go into my daughter's room and I'm like, okay, it's morning. She's not a morning person. She's going to be grumpy. The
Mhm.
way that I'm going to approach any topic is going to be different than if she's in a chatty, good mood, which is normally
Mhm.
at 11 o'clock at night when I want to go to bed, right? Like,
Right.
and so it's like that is the same thing. And so, I teach something that's called the exceptional leadership archetypes, and it teaches you like what each person triggers are. And so when you
Mhm.
know that about yourself and your people, now it's like, oh, such and such is a perfectionist. So if I come across as I'm criticizing, they're gonna shut down,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of things. Like for me, it was control.
Right.
When I am operating from a distressed part of my
Yes.
personality, I am Mrs. Control Freak. But being aware of that helps me see it.
Mhm.
And so, it's so amazing when people just give the opportunity to be aware. And again, growth doesn't come wrapped in comfort.
Nope. No, I like to say that growth comes when we actually actively pursue discomfort, right? Like we can't
Exactly.
just even allow discomfort. Just like that athlete has to actually go to the weight room to lift the weights, like we have to pick some things that are a little bit uncomfortable and go do them.
It's like
We
growing pains.
know, right?
Like growing pains. Do you
It
remember
is.
that when you were
Oh,
growing,
yeah.
you're a teenager
Oh,
and your
yeah.
legs hurt because they're stretching?
And
Yeah.
you know
Oh
what's
my
so
God.
funny, Carmen, is that we know this. So there's been a study in the psychological science. So 94% of people will admit to believing that discomfort is critical for personal growth or for your own success. 94%. That's the majority of people, right? We know, like, I've got to when I get uncomfortable, like, hey, I'm going to be successful. But man, do we run from it, right? Right?
So I think it is because that's a great statistic, by the way. I didn't know those numbers, so thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
But now I'm thinking about it is because if we know that in a conscious level, that's in your executive function, right?
Hmm.
Prefrontal cortex. The problem is when you get stressed out, you go into your amygdala in the fight or
Hmm.
flight, and everything you actually know goes out the window.
Yes. Yes.
So you gotta
Yes.
hijack yourself from your amygdala and go back into your
Yes.
executive function.
Right.
That's what you're an
Absolutely.
executive.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why you have to take a breath, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why we have to have the
Yeah.
power of the pause. Like that's where all of it wraps together. And it is uncomfortable, especially when most of us are, quite frankly, living in a world that we're understaffed, right? We are overcommitted. We are managing like we talked about, personal things at home along with what we're supposed to be doing with our professional lives. And so being intentional about how we show up is just one more thing on our plate. As a strong, like, doer, action oriented, results oriented person, I know that relationships are key, right? But man, is small talk really hard for me, like, as a
Mhm.
leader or knowing as a person. But I know if I don't spend a few minutes chit chatting about someone's, life and what they're doing, I'm not going to show up in the best way. I
Yeah.
am uncomfortable in that moment when I just want to ask the question and get it done, right? But again, these are little moments that stretch you into becoming the person that you know, and leader, right? That you know you need to be.
And I would say thank you for doing that because I remember having a leader. Oh my God. And I could see it. It was almost funny. Like I will go and start talking about non-work stuff just to like see him cringe. Like, what? Why are you asking me about my family?
Yes, yes.
When like I knew everything about my people, everything.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
what beer do you like? What is your favorite
Right,
food? What's your favorite sport? What do your kids like? I mean, I knew
yes,
everything. And
right.
what is a national state for me? I think it became a national state for me.
Mhm.
I am not necessarily either a chit-chatty people person, but I learned, and after 20 years, it kind of became ingrained in
Right,
me, right? It's the
right,
repetition. And
right.
then I didn't have to think about it. Then I enjoy actually getting to know people.
Yeah. And then it becomes less uncomfortable, right? You know the same questions, you know the script, so to speak, right? Doing our world, we go to networking events and I'm very comfortable with that now.
Yeah.
And it is, the more uncomfortable you become, right? If you continue to live in that growth zone of uncomfortableness and not getting into the overwhelming zone of uncomfortableness, then things do get easier, and then you stretch yourself a little more and you stretch yourself a little more, and then you do start to become a little bit of the person that doesn't need to intentionally think about every little step that you're taking.
So I'm thinking there's going to be a handful of people out there thinking like, well,
Mhm.
that sounds so great. And what is in it for me? So
Yeah.
I think like, I feel like we need to like telegraph it, like put it like so clear for people like,
Yes.
this is why you have to do it. So since this is your topic of expertise, what would you say? This is the why.
Yeah, because if we stay in our zone of comfort, we really don't grow. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the most important thing, right? Is that if
Katie,
we
I'm perfectly fine where I am. It's like,
Yeah,
it's so
yeah,
comfortable. It's like having a cozy blanket.
yeah, it is. And you know what I will say is that at times that's also sometimes okay.
Yeah.
Because there are certain areas of our lives where we may have moments that we do need to coast. So, one of the lessons and mindset shifts I bring back um, from the world of sports is that, as leaders, particularly as women leaders, we feel like we have to give 100% all the time at everything, right?
200%.
200%, right? And I in one of my keynotes just have one of the sayings of shifting out of that into that we need to know that every season has a sacrifice, right?
Mhm.
We would never expect for a football team to play every Saturday for 52 weeks a year, or a soccer team to play 2 days a week for 52 weeks a year. We realize they need rest, they need breaks. Yet when it comes to our personal lives, right? We feel like, okay, if I'm in getting my MBA and I have two children and I'm going to start a business and it's like there's no way we can do all of that well.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it actually is okay to coast and not get very uncomfortable in one area because we are actively becoming so uncomfortable in another. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, the biggest case study of that was becoming a parent, right? Like I am stretching myself to the uncomfortable level and the nth level so much in my personal life that I needed a job to be able to show up and do what I wanted to do and do the same thing, know what I was going to predict, and then I can go home and deal with the other side of me. And so I think we also need to recognize that we're going to have to sacrifice some piece of who we are in the different seasons of our lives, whether we're taking care of an elderly parent, whether we're trying to grow really, really hard at work. Well, maybe that's not the time to also be moving and buying a house and doing all the other pieces. And I think we expect a little bit too much of ourselves in stretching in too many areas.
And I think the key word there is season. So, because I used to be like, oh, it is a season. It just became an era in my whole life. And that's why I
Yeah.
burn out, right? Like, because
Yes.
seasons change. So that's the clue right there,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
There's 4 seasons every year. So if
Hmm.
you're going through a very intense time and it's not changing and it's not stopping, and it doesn't have to be 4 months like the season, right? A
Right.
very high stake project can last a year or 18 months, right? But it needs to end. It cannot be
Mhm.
ongoing
Yes. Yes.
forever.
If we are exactly forever. If we are, and that it has to be little stages of uncomfortable every day, right? And I am talking about uncomfortable in a very professional like set, right? Like I think there's a difference between being uncomfortable and working in a toxic environment, right? And I just want to be clear that that's not it. But it's how are we stretching ourselves a little bit, so that every day we are building that confidence and courage and moving forward and our skill set as a leader. And maybe again, that's not always going to be the time because we're being stretched personally so much.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love this conversation. And I think we can talk for hours about it.
Yes.
Because it's such an important topic. It's such an everyday, you can apply it to every area of your life, not just leadership, not just work. I mean,
Hmm.
growing, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yes.
And so every day I have seen so many people also like retire and do nothing and then go downhill because they are not growing anymore.
Right.
And so, even if it's gardening or,
Yes.
anything, you need to get into something, right?
And
So,
that's one of the action steps we talk about in our workshop is what's something you've never done, do it, right? If there's a conversation you've been putting off, do it. I mean, how many times do we avoid an uncomfortable conversation, right? And then it wears on us, it grows on us, and it becomes a bigger thing than it is. That if we would have just called that person and said, "Hey, this struck me the wrong way," or called that person in our office and said, "Hey, look, you've been late 3 times this week. What's going on?" Right? You may find out something great. You may find out something that needs to change, but you've at least stepped into the discomfort enough to have it be off you.
and you know
Right?
what? I love that. I love, and now I'm thinking it's like, oh my God, I have helped my kids do this. But like, I love the idea of put yourself in an uncomfortable situation in something that has low stakes. Like, for instance, my daughter's been dancing ballet since she was a little girl. So she stepped into, the performance art centers with like thousands of people, right? So then, like a couple months ago, she's like, I'm going to do this declamation in Spanish. Sadly, my kids are not fluent in Spanish. They should be, but they are not. And so she tells me like 2 days before, and I'm like, okay, tell me. And I'm like, cannot understand a word. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm trying to help her, and it's like the accent is like so bad, right? Like, which is funny because one of the things is that when I moved here, my accent was so thick, and probably people were thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
But she's speaking Spanish and I don't understand anything. And she's like, "Oh, it's just you and you're hearing." I'm like, "No, honey, I speak in Spanish. Like you're not." Anyways, she practiced enough, but you know what? She did it. She
Yes.
did it, and I guess people were so bad that she actually made it to state. And then
Yes.
she practiced more, and
Yes.
she did better in that one. But I was like, "Yeah, all those
Yeah.
like get yourself in an uncomfortable position." She's like, "I'm just gonna do it." Like,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
we know this as
And
speakers, right? Like
yes.
every time you get into a bigger state and bigger state, people think like we don't get nervous or we're not afraid. Oh yeah, try.
Right. Right.
But that's not
Yeah.
gonna stop us because we know that's what made us grow.
Yes, and it just gets better and
Mhm,
easier, and you
mhm.
learn from it, and you iterate, and you move on, and Yeah, I mean, it can be something as little as like joining an adult swim team, right? Or doing a pottery class, or
And salsa.
yeah, a salsa dancing class. Goodness, that would be definitely stepping into my zone of uncomfortable right there, right? But it has to be personal for you, because what is really uncomfortable for me may be something that you've done day in and day out for your life.
Yeah,
And so,
and I've done salsa professionally, so yeah, I'll
yes,
take you on.
yes, okay. So I'm going to hold you to it. Yeah, I would love that.
Uh, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, Katie. So, what is one thing we want to leave the audience with as we wrap up the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just challenge you to do all the things we've said, to realize that you don't know what you don't know. And if something becomes uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you have to quit. It just means that you have to push through to be better, and realizing that our lives are not meant to be comfortable. And so that if we can push ourselves to, like I said, pursue and actively pursue discomfort, we can be among the best and the most elite out there.
Amen. That was perfect closing right
Yeah.
there. So I'm gonna leave it like that. Such a pleasure to have you, Katie. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first talked about it. It's so nice to have you in my circle of friends, and can't wait to actually meet you in person sometime soon.
Thank you. I hope so too. And I just love watching you succeed and soar. And thank you for having me on today.
Likewise. And you guys know the drill. Until next time, lead intentionally. Bye bye.